Currently, if the user edits an entry by changing the name or the amount, or swiping it to mark it as paid or unpaid, this update entry action is triggered, and this is past the entry ID and an object of the updates that were made. So let's log these out so we can see what's going on here. So I'll log out entry ID and I'll log out updates and save that. So if we reload and change the name of this entry, we see the entry ID being logged out and an object with the updates. And because we only changed the name, we just see an object with a name property set to the new value. And likewise, if I change the amount to -777, we once again see the ID logged out. And this time we see an updates object, which just has a amount property and the new amount. And so this is then grabbing the index of the entry from the entries array using our getIndexById helper. And then it's using object assign to assign this updates object to the entry in our local entries array ref at the position of index. So instead of doing this, let's apply the updates to the corresponding row on Supabase. So I'm going to remove these two lines and jump to the API docs on Supabase and stretch this out a bit. Help me out with a quick like, comment, share, or subscribe. Let's look for update rows. We can see that here. So let's copy this example here and jump back to this update entry action and paste that in. And again, we need to make this function async. So let's add the async keyword. So this query is going to grab our entries table and it's going to update one or more rows based on the criteria that we specify in this object. So each key in this object will represent the column name in our entries table. So if we set this key name to name, then we're going to update the name column, etc. And we can add as many keys and values to this object as we like so that we can update multiple columns at once. And we already have this updates object with the keys and values that we need, which we logged out before. So when we update the amount on an entry, we see an object with the key set to amount and then the new value. So we can just pass in this updates object because that's going to specify everything that we want to update. So let's select this object here and just change that to updates. And this query is going to make these updates specified here on all rows which match the criteria specified in this equals function. We only want to make this update on one row on the entry with the corresponding ID. So we can just set this equals function to ID and the entry ID, which we're passing into this action. So let's change this to entry ID. And again, let's handle the error first. So if there's an error, let's log out the error object. Let's change the entries table to entries Z to trigger an error. Let's save this, reload Moneyballs, and try to update an entry. And again, the update error object comes back empty. Hopefully this will be fixed at some point, but we can just display our own message in a dialog. So let's select this console log and use our composable use show error message. And we could just set this to entry could not be updated on Supabase. So let's save that and try to update an entry again. I'll try to change the amount and we see the error dialog. So let's jump back to our code and correct the table name. And again, I don't think we need to use the data object. So let's remove that and save that. And let's see if we can update an entry. I'll drag this over to the left and get the entries table over on the right. So let's edit the name of this rent entry and hit enter. And we see an error. Did I not save that? I did. Let's just try reloading and try to edit an entry. And if we jump over to Supabase and click this refresh button, we can see the name was updated. And if we change the amount, let's set this to -777, hit enter and click on refresh. We see the amount was updated and paid is currently set to true. Let's swipe right to mark it as unpaid. And again, refresh the table, and we see the paid property was updated. Before we move on, let's just remove these console logs, get rid of those, and save that. Get the full course, including authentication, row-level security and policies, database functions and triggers, storage, edge functions, and running Supabase locally from makeappsacademy.com, or click the link in the description.